Leqembi versus Donanemab, beta amyloid plaques or tau protein tangles, and a quarter of them had symptoms which included headaches, and 3 people died from brain swelling or bleeding. Is there a breakthrough for Alzheimer's disease just around the corner? Hello, welcome to the Crossover Connections with Jack Wang Podcast. My name is Jack. I'm an Australian scientist and college professor at a university. There are all of these exposés, these long-form articles about how slow the progress in Alzheimer's research really is. We've known about Alzheimer's for a very long time. We all probably know someone in our immediate family or almost immediate family with Alzheimer's disease. Notion that Big Pharma is this all-powerful entity that can solve everything. You would have thought that the payoff for curing something like Alzheimer's disease is so incredibly high that someone would have already come out the woodwork with a cure. As this article from the ABC goes into it, they interview a number of Alzheimer's disease researchers. This is a very dispiriting state of the field back in 2020. 300 Alzheimer's drug trials have failed so far. The article makes reference of something called the amyloid hypothesis, this buildup of the protein amyloid in the brain that is one of the early signs that Alzheimer's is on its way. And as amyloid builds up, it appears as plaques in the brain. As the hypothesis goes, as amyloid builds up in the brain, they form these plaques that would then interfere with the brain communication and then destroy memory function as well as other parts of the brain functionality as well. And many of the therapies were focused on trying to slow down the production of amyloid in the brain. All of the efforts that were invested into these anti-amyloid drugs that would prevent or slow down amyloid from being built up in the brain, when you get negative trial after negative trial, it does give you pause. The other characteristic protein involved in Alzheimer's is tau, T-A-U, that go hand in hand with memory and cognitive decline, and the combination of the amyloid plaques as well as the tau protein. These two are the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease from a clinically diagnostic perspective. In 2020, there wasn't huge promise of a breakthrough. Fast forward now to 2023, and we have not just one, but we have 2 headlines in quick succession all around new drugs against Alzheimer's disease. And what's really interesting is that both of these new drugs, Leqembi as well as Donanemab, they are actually anti-amyloid therapies as well. So people who thought the amyloid hypothesis was flawed all of a sudden have 2 new drugs that maybe counteract their line of thinking. Right now, the US FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, endorsed this drug for IV therapy. You got to undergo this IV therapy every 2 weeks for 18 months. Those who received Leqembi, as opposed to a placebo, their memory declined more slowly. How much more slowly? A difference of less than half the point on the memory scale could translate to additional years of contact with loved ones. So it's nothing to be scoffed at. There is promise that this anti-amyloid drug, probably for the first time, has an impact in slowing down memory decline in Alzheimer's disease. The other drug is also an anti-amyloid drug. It is called Donanemab. And this is actually pretty tricky to pronounce. It rhymes with doner kebab, Donanemab. And the mab at the end of it, the MAB, is a simplification of monoclonal antibody. It's an antibody that is very specific, that binds to and recognizes one thing. Both Donanemab and Leqembi or lecanemab target the amyloid protein, which forms the plaques in the brains of Alzheimer's patients. It could slow Alzheimer's disease progression by 35% in patients. That's quite a lot. 35% is dramatic. And it's similar to its predecessor, lecanemab. Lecanemab or Leqembi has been through the trial a little earlier and it already has FDA approval. And it's the interplay between these amyloid plaques, as well as the other protein called tau, that we believe to be responsible for Alzheimer's disease. And the people who were in the study, they were all in the early stages of Alzheimer's and aged between 60 and 85. At the 12-month mark, 47% had no evidence of amyloid plaques. The presence of the plaque does not confirm 100% that you will get Alzheimer's disease. I'm really interested in the science side of things, exactly how this drug works and why this drug has worked when other previous anti-amyloid therapies haven't worked. Science is probably one of the 2 biggest journals in our field of molecular biosciences, the other being Nature. Scientific news on the Science website is probably pretty well vetted and pretty well researched. Alzheimer's trial shows clear benefit, but also significant risk of Eli Lilly antibody. On the heels of the historic full US approval of the Alzheimer's therapy Leqembi, that's Leqembi, a similarly acting drug, Donanemab, has demonstrated effectiveness against the brain disorder, but with greater risk. Here's the kicker. Both Donanemab and Leqembi come with risk of serious or even fatal brain swelling and bleeding, and the positive trial results would likely not be questioned by patients, clinicians, or payers if these antibodies were low risk, inexpensive, and simple to administer, but they are none of these. It involves intravenous infusion every 4 weeks for 18 months, at least that's what happened in the trial. Intravenous infusion is not something you can do at home by yourself. You need to go to a clinic for them to do it for you. Alzheimer's has two hallmarks, one being the beta amyloid plaques, and the other being the presence of the tau protein. And the people in these trials were split into a group which had the amyloid plaques versus those that had a lot of these tangles that are filled with the tau protein. And the patients with the beta amyloid plaques but not much of the tau protein had the best improvement. They had a 35 to 36% slowdown in cognitive decline. If you had high tau, the tau protein in these tangles in your brain, either a 21% improvement in cognitive function compared to a placebo or no difference at all. So it would appear that the tau protein is a marker of a different stage of Alzheimer's, after which drugs like this may be not so effective after all. Well, people need to keep taking these anti-amyloid antibodies forever or indefinitely because of cost, side effects, and the inconvenience and discomfort of infusions. The trial experimented with discontinuing Donanemab if a PET scan 6 or 12 months in treatment showed clearance of these plaques. And if you're clear, you wouldn't need to go back on these infusions. That's a functional model. That also makes it a little bit cheaper. These antibodies come with a chance of brain swelling or bleeding, known as amyloid-related imaging abnormalities or ARIA, and these can be fatal. Out of the patients who went on Donanemab, they had brain swelling, and a quarter of them had symptoms which included headaches, and 3 people died from brain swelling or bleeding. So this is not completely risk-free. Leqembi, it is a lot safer based on these same measurements. In the Donanemab trial, 37% of the people getting the antibody developed these amyloid-related imaging abnormalities or ARIA, whereas in the Leqembi trial, only 21% of patients developed these imaging abnormalities. 12.6% had brain swelling. There were no deaths related to the drug and related to Leqembi. So it appears that Leqembi is a little bit more safe than Donanemab, but also I think the impact it has on memory decline is a bit more subtle than Donanemab as well. But these are a pool of a couple of thousand people. When you expand the scope of these trials to a much larger pool of people, you're likely going to see even more side effects. But all of that is worth it if your loved one at risk of Alzheimer's disease has a few more years to remain connected to their family and enjoy the memories of their loved ones and being present in the moment. I'm Jack. Hope to connect you again next time around.